Alone, broke, over 70. That's not just a title. That was my reality not too long ago. And I'll tell you straight, when you find yourself standing in that place at this stage of life, there's no guidebook waiting for you. Nobody pulls you aside and explains how to begin again when you thought your life was already settled. You just wake up one day, and everything that once felt steady is gone. A few years back, things looked very different for me. I had a home, a rhythm, a sense that I had already built what I was going to build. At my age, you don't expect to be starting over. You expect to be maintaining, maybe slowing down a little, enjoying what you worked for. But life has a way of rewriting those expectations without asking your permission. I lost my wife in a car accident. Not long after, I lost my parents, too. One loss after another, until the house that used to feel full of life became quiet in a way that's hard to describe unless you've lived it. And then reality sets in. The world doesn't pause because you're grieving. The bills keep coming. Property taxes go up. Utilities climb higher. Repairs don't wait. And when you go from 2 people to 1, the income doesn't magically stretch to cover everything. I remember sitting at the table, looking at numbers that just didn't make sense anymore. No matter how I tried to rearrange them, I couldn't make it work. At first, I didn't do much of anything. I sat in it. I let the weight of everything press down on me. I felt like I had failed somehow, like I was supposed to hold things together and couldn't. That kind of thinking can trap you if you're not careful. Days blend into weeks, and before you know it, you've been standing still while everything around you keeps moving. But eventually, something inside me shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It was just a quiet realization that if I didn't act, I was going to lose everything anyway. Not just the house, but any chance I had left to rebuild something that resembled a life. So I started looking at what I actually had left. And the truth was, the house was it. That was my last real asset. But that house wasn't just a structure. It was memories, years of living, pieces of the people I had lost. Letting go of it felt like letting go of them in some way. But holding on to it was slowly pulling me under. It took me over a year to get that house sold. It wasn't simple. I worked with more than one real estate agent, dealt with delays, uncertainty, and a whole lot of second-guessing. And during that time, I was still living there, surrounded by everything I had accumulated over a lifetime. That's when I realized the real challenge wasn't selling the house. It was everything inside it. I wasn't just sorting through my belongings. I had my wife's things, my parents' things, items from other family members who were gone. Every box I opened carried weight. Every object had a story attached to it. Some days I'd pick something up and just sit there, remembering where it came from, who it belonged to, what it meant. And I'll be honest with you, there were moments I didn't think I could do it. It's one thing to say you're going to start over. It's another thing entirely to begin letting go of a lifetime. But I didn't have a choice. So I got methodical. I started organizing everything, taking inventory, deciding what stayed and what had to go. And I had to change the way I looked at things. I stopped seeing them as memories and started seeing them as resources, something that could help me get through what was coming next. So I began selling. Furniture, tools, collections, anything that had value. My garage used to be full of equipment, tools I thought I'd use for years to come. Letting those go was like closing the door on a version of myself I thought I'd carry into old age. But that version of life was no longer possible. And here's something I came to understand during that time. If you're going to rebuild, especially later in life, you can't do it halfway. You can't hold on to the past and expect to move forward at the same time. It doesn't work. You end up stuck, weighed down by things that no longer serve you. So I made a decision to go all the way. By the time the house finally sold, there wasn't much left in it. I had taken it down to the bare essentials. What remained could fit into the back of a truck. And when you see your entire life reduced to that, it forces you to rethink what really matters. When the sale went through, I had a check in my hand. For a brief moment, I felt some relief, like maybe I had made it through the hardest part. But that feeling didn't last long because reality has a way of catching up with you. I had debts, more than I wanted to admit. And once I started subtracting what I owed from what I had, that check got smaller and smaller. I sat down with a pencil and paper and went through it line by line, paid everything off, cleared every obligation I could. By the time I finished, there wasn't much left. Not enough to rebuild the kind of life I used to have, but enough to give me a small foothold. I bought an old box truck and a used camper. That was my new beginning. Everything I owned either fit inside that camper or was packed into that truck. I remember standing there, looking at it all, realizing this was my life now. At over 70, starting from something that looked a whole lot like nothing. And then came the question you can't avoid once you've let go of everything. Where do you go? Because when the house is gone and the possessions are gone, you're not just starting over financially. You're starting over in every sense of the word. You need a place to exist, even if it's temporary. And I didn't have one lined up. I didn't want to spend what little I had left on a storage unit. Every dollar mattered. So the box truck became my storage. It wasn't comfortable, it wasn't ideal, but it made sense. When you're in a situation like that, you learn quickly that comfort becomes secondary to survival. For a short time, I was in between places, not quite settled, not quite sure what came next. That kind of uncertainty can wear on you. It gets into your thoughts, keeps you up at night. But sometimes, when you're at your lowest point, something unexpected shows up. A friend reached out to me and offered something I hadn't even thought to ask for. He had a piece of land and said I could stay there, rent-free, as long as I kept an eye on it. To me, that wasn't just an offer, it was a lifeline. So I took what little I had, drove out there, and set up my camper. No running water, no electricity, none of the conveniences I had been used to for most of my life. Just a place to park and a chance to catch my breath. And I remember that first night very clearly, sitting there, looking around at what my life had become, feeling the weight of everything I had lost, but also realizing something I hadn't felt in a long time. This wasn't the end. Whether I was ready for it or not, this was the beginning. And once you accept that it's a beginning, not an ending, something inside you starts to shift, slowly at first, almost too subtle to notice. I wish I could tell you that from that point on everything got easier, that I woke up the next morning with clarity and purpose, but that's not how it works. The truth is, for a long time after I settled onto that piece of land, I was still a mess. I'd wake up in that little camper, no running water, no power, just silence and my own thoughts. And those thoughts, they weren't kind. I kept replaying everything that had happened, everything I had lost, every decision I questioned. I told myself I had failed. I told myself I had made the wrong choices. At over 70, you don't expect to be starting from scratch. And when you are, it can feel like you've somehow fallen behind in a race that's already almost over. There were days I didn't know what I was doing out there. Days where I felt like I had stripped my life down so far that there was nothing left to build on. But even in that state, there was one thing I understood clearly. I had to stop the bleeding. I had to make sure that whatever little I had left didn't slip through my fingers. So I became very careful. Every dollar mattered. I was living on a small fixed income, about $1,100 a month, and when that's all you've got, you learn quickly how to stretch it. I cut everything down to the bare minimum. No unnecessary trips into town, no eating out, no spending just to feel better for a moment. I started cooking simple meals, managing what little I had, and paying attention in a way I never had before. At the time, I didn't see it as progress. I saw it as survival. I felt miserable doing it, if I'm being honest. It felt like deprivation, like punishment almost. But looking back now, I can tell you that was the foundation. That was where things started to turn, even if I couldn't see it then. Because when you strip life down that far, something interesting happens. You start to separate what you want from what you actually need. And those two things are very different. Most of us spend decades building a life around wants, around comfort, around habits we don't question. But when all of that is taken away, you're left with the basics: food, water, shelter, and time. And time, at my age, time feels different. You become very aware of it. You start to ask yourself what you're going to do with whatever is left. It took me a couple of years to really change my thinking, not just on the surface, but deep down. I had to stop seeing myself as someone who had lost everything and start seeing myself as someone who had been given a chance, whether I wanted it or not, to start fresh. That's not an easy shift to make. It doesn't happen overnight. It comes through a lot of quiet moments, a lot of reflection, and a lot of uncomfortable honesty with yourself. I began to realize that holding on to the past, even in my thoughts, was keeping me stuck. All those memories, all those what-ifs, they weren't helping me move forward. They were anchoring me to a life that no longer existed. And as painful as it was, I had to let go of that too. Not just the physical things, but the emotional weight. During that time, I started putting aside a small amount of money whenever I could. It wasn't much, about $100 a month when things allowed. Now, some people might hear that and think it's insignificant. But when you're working with very little, that small amount becomes meaningful. It becomes proof that you're moving in the right direction, even if it's slow. Month by month, that little bit added up. It gave me something I hadn't had in a long time, a margin. Not much, but enough to feel like I wasn't right on the edge anymore. Somewhere along the way, I also started sharing my thoughts online. At first, it wasn't anything serious. I just needed an outlet, a place to speak without feeling like I was talking to myself all the time. I'd sit there and talk about what I was going through, the fear, the frustration, the loneliness. I didn't expect much to come from it, but over time, people started listening. And not just listening, they started responding. They shared their own stories, their own struggles. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel completely alone in what I was experiencing. That sense of community, it changed something in me. It helped me see that what I had gone through, as difficult as it was, had some value. It could help someone else. And in return, their support helped me stand a little taller, think a little clearer, and start shaping what I wanted the next chapter of my life to look like. And that's the thing I want to pass on to you. Starting over, especially later in life, isn't about recreating what you had. It's about building something that fits who you are now. And to do that, you have to be willing to let go completely. You can't pack up your old life, put it in storage, and expect to move forward. All you're doing is dragging it behind you. It becomes a weight, an anchor that slows you down. When I say I had to make a radical change, I mean exactly that. I had to reduce everything to the essentials and rebuild from there. Clothes on my back, a small place to sleep, food on the table. That was my starting point. And now, here I am, a little over 3 years later. I'm getting ready to move on to my own piece of land again. It's not grand. It's not what I used to have, but it's mine. And I built my way back to it step by step. More importantly, I've changed. I don't worry the way I used to. I don't lose sleep over things that used to keep me up at night. I've learned how to live with less, and in doing that, I've found a kind of peace I didn't expect. Does that mean everything is perfect? No, not at all. Life still has its challenges, but I feel steady again. I feel like I understand what matters and what doesn't, and that makes all the difference. If you find yourself in a situation like the one I was in, alone, struggling, unsure of what comes next, don't wait too long to act. Time matters. The longer you stay stuck, the harder it becomes to climb out. Even a small step in the right direction is better than standing still. And understand this, what worked for me might not work for everyone, but the principle behind it, that willingness to change your thinking, to let go, to simplify, that's something that applies to all of us. Sometimes, in order to move forward, you have to give up everything that's holding you in place. It's not easy. It's painful. There will be days when you question whether it's worth it. But if you can push through that, if you can embrace what could be instead of holding on to what was, you might find yourself in a place you never expected. A place where you feel at peace again. I didn't think I'd get here. I really didn't. But I did, one step at a time. So if you're out there listening, trying to figure out your own next step, take it from an old man who's been through it. You're not done yet. There's still something ahead of you, even if you can't see it clearly right now. I appreciate you taking the time to sit with me and listen to my story. It means more than you know. Take care of yourselves. Keep moving forward in your own way, and I'll see you again next time.